guys, and sorry for the technical difficulties. My name is Jaya Thomas, and I will be moderating tonight's panel. And we are going to get started with some brief introductions. In the back are some handouts with everyone's bio a little more in depth. But right now we're going to get started with some very brief introductions. We're going to go down the panel, and if you guys can just say your name and give a short bio about what you do in the social media space. So we'll start on the end.
Hi everyone, my name is Sabine Quattant. I am the Director of Marketing over at Blavity. And I've been head of the social media team for about a few years now, so managing all of the accounts, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of that.
Hey, what's going on everybody? My name is Xavier. I'm a filmmaker from USC School of Cinematic Arts. You can say I'm like a semi-pro tweeter or something like that. I'm not absolutely sure, but I tend to just make films, do artwork, create and write.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Walker, and I'm the Director of Culture and Entertainment Advocacy at Color of Change. Color of Change is the largest online civil rights group specifically for the Black community, and so I oversee a lot of our relationships and our work in the entertainment industry.
April? Thank you. And as I mentioned, my name is Jaya Thomas. I am a sports and entertainment attorney. I'm also a professor at UCLA, and I write for the magazine Entrepreneur Magazine. So today's topic is Black Twitter, using social media to drive social change. Donovan Ramsey, a writer for The Atlantic, recently wrote, "Black Twitter is a force. It is also not particularly well understood by those who aren't a part of it." So for any of you who may not be a part of Black Twitter, I wanted to start the conversation off tonight by defining what Black Twitter actually is. So for my panelists, how would you define Black Twitter?
I guess we can go first. I think my way of defining it would honestly be like a consciousness of many Black people speaking on a variety of different issues that tend to just go in and out throughout different categories, ideas, things to that degree. I mean, honestly, it's a case of it's a collective of all of us. Black Twitter doesn't always necessarily just include just Black people. It can have other people within it, but we make up the collective majority of it, and we just tend to drive the social consciousness and ideas and stuff that usually comes from Twitter. So more often than not, if an idea, if a certain thing is being talked about, it usually originates from us, especially when it comes to a lot of creative endeavors, and then also a lot of the social issues, for good, bad, or just hilariously, that's happening at the moment.
Yeah, I'd probably add to the idea that I think Black Twitter is a manifestation of kind of, the presence that Black people have culturally, whether it's music, whether it's sports, we have so much influence in all these other places, and Black Twitter is a manifestation of that in the social media space, whether it's creating new lingo or vernacular or, identifying new social issues and new communities and new trends. It's really just that digital manifestation of what we would see in the normal reality space.
And I think the one thing that I would add there is that not just what's, obviously it's existing on social media, but it's also taking kind of like what Brian was saying, taking things that are happening in our reality, in the real world, in our day-to-day, and having that conversation in that space. And so it's that real life Black experience and having that conversation in a digital space.
April, do you want to add to that?
Say that there are Black folks who are not members of Black Twitter, and there are white folks who are. So I think it really has to do about appreciation of Black culture and the experience that Black people have, even if you don't have those experiences directly. So it's a microcosm of society, but definitely not a monolith.
Excellent answer. And really recently, Twitter has become a tool for mobilizing Black activism. As many of you know, Black Lives Matter started off as a hashtag. It started off as a hashtag in 2013. It was launched on Twitter. And it was launched with regards to Zimmerman. Once he was acquitted, it was founded by 3 women. One of them put on Twitter, Black Lives Matter. And for the first year, from July 2013, when the hashtag was initially launched, until July 2014, it was rarely used. It took really about a year for it to catch on, for a lot of people to kind of catch on to the Black Lives Matter hashtag. And now it's the most popular tweet among Black Twitter. Why, in your opinion, do some hashtags catch on and some do not? Black Twitter's always coming up with different hashtags, you know, hands up, Black Lives Matter, Ferguson, Charleston, and some last and some don't. Some are effective, some are not. Why are some hashtags effective and last and some do not?
I'll start this one. I think it has a lot to do with the subject matter and the interest that people have. You know, I can talk a little bit from personal experience because Oscar So White was created in January of 2015, but we really saw a resurgence and an increase in the analytics in January of 2016. I think part of that is because of the issue behind it. So in other words, when there aren't any nominees of color or nominees from marginalized communities the first year, that's a problem, but it can be maybe dismissed as a fluke. When it becomes the same issue the second year, then it's not a fluke, it's a pattern, right? Because now we have 2 in a row. So I really think it has to do with the subject matter and how important that issue is to the community as a whole, and whether it has staying power. You know, so unfortunately we see so many hashtags that are created because of state-sanctioned violence against Black people, and so we've seen so many names that have been used as hashtags and rallying points, and they're still used today, unfortunately. But I think the underpinning there is the importance of the issue that the hashtag represents.
And April, to piggyback off that, walk us through, how did you come up with the hashtag Oscar So White?
Well, I really wish that I had a sexy story to share. I was half naked in my family room getting ready for work and watching the Oscar nominations announced, as I always have for 30 years. And I had a, you know, Sal's Pizzeria moment from Do the Right Thing. You know, how come there ain't no brothers up on the wall? You know, and nomination after nomination, it became very clear that not just in the acting categories, but also for those filmmakers behind the camera, you know, the directors and the screenwriters and the cinematographers, no one or virtually no one was getting nominated. And so, you know, for me, if it doesn't happen on Twitter, it doesn't happen at all. So I took the Twitter in frustration, and the very first tweet was, Oscar So White, they asked to touch my hair, you know, and it was supposed to be something very flippant and sarcastic, and that's the way it trended initially. And it wasn't until a couple of days later when the conversation pivoted a bit and we started having discussions about the lack of inclusion of marginalized communities. And so, you know, I had to sort of make up my mind that I was going to be, you know, sort of in charge of this movement and decide where it was going to go next.
Did you expect the hashtag to have the effect that it did when you initially tweeted it out?
No, and I don't think most people do. You know, I know that Xavier can probably speak to this well with Tina and the Gucci flip-flops, and I hope to get into that in a little bit. Well, that's why we're all here, right? We're being real. But I'm sure that there are some people that sit around and say, okay, this is what we want to do, and this is how we want to create this movement or this change or whatever the goal is. But I had no idea. I mean, I've done literally interviews with journalists from around the world. I'm here this evening by Skype because of that hashtag, and I never could have imagined that it would have taken off the way it did. I'm very thankful that it did. I'm very humbled by the support that I've received from, regular folks like me from around the world, but there was no way that I could have known that it would become what it has.
And another quick question I want to ask you is, can you tell us some of the other effects that this hashtag has had, in your opinion, on the entertainment industry or diversity in general?
Well, I think we're still seeing the effects of the hashtag reverberating throughout the entertainment industry as a whole. And in fact, the Oscars So White hashtag has sort of spurred conversations in other areas. So, for example, I know that the country, Germany, is talking about the lack of diversity in their films, in German films. I was at the Toronto Black Film Festival a couple of months ago, and a filmmaker from South Africa came up and gave me a high five because, the hashtag was helping him open doors that weren't previously open to him, and that's mind-blowing to me. We see J.J. Abrams saying now, come, help me find filmmakers of color because I want to work with them. And Warner Brothers now has their director's apprenticeship program. And there's even more going on behind the scenes. And this is all in addition to the changes that the Academy itself has made. And so we see Oscars So White, and then the flip side of that I'm involved with now is Tony's So Diverse. So the Tony Awards are this Sunday, and Broadway Black will be, having its viewing party specifically because there are so many nominees of color for Tony Awards. So that's a wonderful thing. And we see things like Journalism So White with Jose Antonio Vargas sort of spearheading that, even though he didn't create that hashtag. So I hope that what the hashtag has done is bring awareness to the issues about the lack of representation of marginalized communities, and that it continues to travel until this conversation no longer needs to be had.
Excellent. Now I'm going to turn the conversation over a little bit to Xavier. He is somewhat of a Twitter legend. He has over 40,000 Twitter followers. And the first question I want to ask you is, when did you join Twitter and how did you end up accumulating so many followers on Twitter?
So I joined probably around 2011 during my undergrad years at the University of Alabama. And at that point, I was just tweeting like anybody else, man. I was just on there. One of my homeboys kept me like, dog, you gotta get on this thing. It's real dope. Man, I don't do that social media stuff. Man, I'm good, man. Like, no, thank you. So he finally made one for me. I was like, that's not cool. But regardless, I was like, fine, I'll jump on this. I'll do my thing with it. And essentially, just went on and started talking about social issues, things like that. And, little by little, more people started following me, checking me out, hearing what I had to say. But it was only in the past maybe year and a half where I was, finished up undergrad. I was over at UC School of Cinematic Arts. I was doing my films and all that type of stuff. And I was getting closer to graduation. And I was like, well, this is an interesting conundrum because once I got out of school, I'm not going to be able to make as many things as some of my other friends there who got a little more money behind them in general. So I was thinking to myself, what is an avenue in a way that I can still get my stories out, still, let people know who I am as a storyteller, as a filmmaker, as a director, as a writer, but not necessarily always have to try and dump a lot of money into different things. So I was like, so the first thing I did, I remember seeing the Zola story when that came out, and that was crazy. And it was great. I was like, what is this? I'm like, this is like a feature being tweeted out, man. This is amazing. You know, some folks are like, oh, this is terrible. Nobody should read this. Like Love and Hip Hop. I love and Hip Hop anyway. Like I like stuff that is interesting first and foremost to me. So I was like, okay, this is interesting, and this is something that nobody's really thought about because of course, folks are doing stories to a degree, but nobody was really like trying to tap into that. So I did like one story before that. It went a little crazy. It bumped me up maybe like from 7,000 to 8,000. I was like, okay, that's dope. Then I did one more. I was like, okay, that kind of got big. Folks are starting to flock. It's starting to be interested in this. And then it was that third one, Tina and the Gucci Flip Flop, that like I did that one. I tweeted it. I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. Okay, cool. I gotta do some work. Came back like a few hours later, man. This is going crazy. I'm like, what is going on here? And literally, it was a jump from like be 8,000 or 9,000 to like 15,000 overnight, which was crazy. And then the whole thing is that like the story got there, and then it started getting picked up outside of the Twitter sphere as well. It started getting picked up in different places. So it was jump from that, then that 15,000, and it hit 20,000. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. This is a thing, and I can do this, and I enjoy it. And it still allows me to like get out the stories that happen to me, have with my friends, and then let people know like I am a filmmaker, I am a storyteller, I am someone that's doing this, and you need to recognize and deal with me. So after that, I started doing. I think I've done about 25 on there now, for real, and that's jumped up from going at 15 to 20 now to like 40,000 plus. And what it allowed me to do was not only tell these stories and reach out to folks and get folks interested in who I am as a filmmaker, but then it also just branded me as that, which was like the whole point in the first place, because a lot of filmmakers, a lot of folks in general, like you make your films, you do all the stuff with it, maybe you go to a festival, nothing happens, and then you're like, okay, what's next? But what a lot of us, especially underprivileged folks, especially folks that don't have that infrastructure, need to think about is how we can get our stories out in a way that folks are going to be able to listen to that isn't going to bankrupt us. And that was one of the biggest reasons why I kept on going with this and why it was such an important and great thing. So, yeah.
Excellent. And on your Twitter feed, you also talk a lot about issues pertaining to race, social justice, diversity. What are some of the challenges you face talking about those type of issues on Twitter?
Well, I think one of the biggest problems is folks kind of come in and be a little ugly, say a lot of bad things to me, things you wouldn't say to most folks that ain't in your face. But, it is what it is. Some folks are going to be like that. But for that, I had to block them. It is what it is. But what was most important to me with doing that is that if you're going to hear my stories, you're going to know me as not only a director and storyteller, you're going to know me as a person. So if you're going to enjoy this stuff, you got to deal with everything else. And if you enjoy what I talk about, what I tell stories about, all of that stuff is going to inherently become a part of who I am as a filmmaker. So you can't just be like, oh man, you should just stick to stories and do nothing else. Like, nah, bro, when you're doing that, if you are going to listen to me, if you're going to hear what I have to say, then you need to hear not only the stories, but you need to hear it, because a lot of these folks, which is an amazing thing about it, was, I have like 9 and 10-year-olds, tweeting me. Like, you shouldn't even have a Twitter, but whatever. Or like even folks that are like 15, 16 teenagers that, come for me, they hear the stories, and they're really enjoying it. Then I, switch over to a societal issue or an infrastructure issue or something dealing with black people or dealing with people of color. And, these kids, and of course these adults as well, are hearing these things for the first time from a perspective that they're not used to, and it's kind of opening them up. I've had folks, hit me up or talk to me about that. Folks that like later on, she's like, hey, you're that person. I'm like, oh, who are you? But, they're like, I heard what you had to say, and that changed me up a little bit on how I thought about these things, which is such a necessity within itself, because beyond just being just a filmmaker, I want to make sure that, what I'm teaching and what I'm putting out there is allowing people to at least change and learn something new and different that they're not usually used to.
So, this is for the entire panel. Why do you think Twitter is such an effective platform for discussing issues pertaining to race and social justice as opposed to other social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat? Why do you think Black Twitter has become such a big thing as opposed to Black Instagram or Black Facebook?
Well, I think that Black people in general have always, we've been the first adopters of social media and a lot of like technological advances. And so I think that's one thing. And then the other thing is that Twitter is designed for conversations. It's really quick. It's reactive. You can tag somebody. You can react right back. You can retweet it. It's designed, and I don't know if that's what Twitter had in mind when they designed it. It seems like it did. It's designed for you to have a conversation with someone. Versus Facebook, you can go, you can have a long conversation thread, but it's not as easy and it's not as reactive. Instagram is the same thing. You can kind of tag someone and have that conversation, but to be able to see a full thread, you can search a hashtag and see all the conversations that's happening around it. You can, you can tag someone, like I said, you can reply to someone. So I think it's just the way that it was designed. It's conducive to having those conversations.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the technical implications of Twitter, created a journalistic kind of aspect of Twitter that creates those conversations and makes it easier than every other social platform. Even though Facebook, to an extent, in many ways, drives a lot of traffic for websites and many other digital platforms, I think the ability to kind of have that conversation and multiple people be engaging in that conversation is really critical for Twitter.
I think the biggest thing is just the fact that we have a platform. Like, you yourself, if you want to get out your ideas, what you have to say, and what you believe, you have a platform to yourself that nobody can really take away, and you can disperse that out there. Now, of course, it's up to the Twitter sphere whether or not they're going to listen to you or not, or hear what you have to say. But, before this, maybe you had a Facebook, maybe you had a blog, maybe you had a website, but that really didn't necessitate or mean that folks were going to come to it, we're going to listen to it, we're going to, find it. Whereas on Twitter, if you're, doing quality tweets, or you're talking about issues that people care about, or you're making very, very good, strong content, they're going to flock to you. They're going to want to listen to what you have to say. And, it is your platform. It is your ability to get out what you think and what you have to say, and nobody can stop that. And I think that's something that we, as Black people just didn't have before. And it just helped out a lot. Because, I'll be honest with you, I think about where I am now and the stories I've told and things that have happened for me. And that was because I was able to have this platform that was completely unto myself. And, I could basically work it how I wanted it to be. So my Twitter is an embodiment of myself. And, I'm just blessed to say that folks want to hear that.
I would just add, as a final thought, that I think part of it is that with all of the other platforms, you aren't able to curate the same way that you can on Twitter. So on Twitter, I can talk to anybody in the world, right? I can talk to a celebrity or, anybody can jump in and out of the conversation, a redneck, whatever. On Facebook, you have your followers, you have your friends, but these are people that you've specifically invited into your world. And so I think that's the difference, that the conversation is definitely more interactive, sometimes better, sometimes worse, but you can't control it as much. And so that's, I think, for me at least, makes it more interesting because you never know who's going to jump into your mentions and break bad or attempt to do so.
Very true. And next question I want to ask is just about social media, Twitter campaigns in general, and hashtags. Obviously, Oscar So White was a very effective social media campaign that brought to light an issue affecting African Americans. In your opinion, what have been some of the other most effective Twitter campaigns that have highlighted issues affecting the African American community?
Well, even to touch on one right now that's, I think, really critical and been extremely impactful is Free Jasmine, for Jasmine from Pasadena and the felony lynching charge, and really how that's helped to bolster, everybody's awareness around this issue that is so, obviously contrarian to the original intent of this law and, all of the history that goes into actually lynching. I think the actual hashtag itself has allowed people to learn about this, to figure out ways that they can engage. This is an issue that is not just in Pasadena. This is an issue that's around the country, and And I think that the hashtag will allow that to kind of grow and create a larger community around not just Jasmine, but this specific issue itself. So.
For me, I think I'm just gonna switch it up and talk more about like on a entertainment and race with that. So one that comes to mind to me is like when it started off for Game of Thrones, the Dim Thrones one, and then of course it's kind of changed up now. It's Thrones Y'all after the whole fiasco that happened out there. But the reason why I bring that up is like, you know, for a long time, a lot of folks assumed that black folks, you know, only watched certain type of shows, like maybe you peep The Wire, maybe you peep Living Single, a few things like that. But, you know, they didn't think that we're watching Breaking Bad or Game of Thrones or different things like that that are, you know, mainstay stuff that's really, really awesome. And the reason why I think that one is a mainstay, that one I think is great too, is that, you know, with the Thrones one, you come to find out that not only do a lot of people love Game of Thrones, but, you know, it's a driving force for black women who want to talk about it, which, you know, for many people outside of black Twitter, they might assume like, oh, a black woman wouldn't watch that. And that's silly. Like, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want to check out things like that? But, you know, what I think it, you know, specifically speaks to is the fact that we are not a monolith. We are diverse. We like many, many things. And, you know, it just shows the fact that when it comes to the intersection of entertainment and race, we are all within those things and we do all of that type of stuff. And it just speaks to the fact that, again, we are not a monolith. We love many, many things. We want to try many, many different things. And I think that's just like, you know, amazing and so important to get across.
One that comes to mind for me is You OK Sis, you know, and for the reason that one is the one that resonates with me is because it was done in a way to, you know, if for anyone who doesn't know, you know, the hashtag was created to bring awareness to sexual harassment on the streets. And, you know, when you're walking by and having just people, you know, catcalling you and, you know, grabbing you, whatever it might be. It brought awareness to that because that's something that happens every single day. No one is talking about it, you know, so to bring that awareness, but also it was done in a way to focus a little bit on like the healing of it. I do want to point out though, I do think that sometimes the black community is forced into healing too quickly. I do want to make that a note of that, but for me, that's what resonated with me because it was focusing on the people that it's affecting while still bringing awareness to it, but doing it in a way to have some sort of healing for the folks and not re-traumatize people in particular ways.
April, any other particular campaigns that have stuck out for you?
I was definitely going to mention You OK Sis as well. That was started by Feminista Jones because I think, you know, it definitely has staying power and it's one that we use all the time to discuss issues of street harassment and online harassment of women, especially black women and other women of color. You know, I think another really strong one right now is Justice for Flint. Because we're discussing the issues about the lead in the water in Flint, Michigan, and that in fact has broadened. So, you know, it's not just Flint, it's also Baltimore and other major cities nationwide. So I think that one is really important and we'll see that one used for quite some time as well. You know, and I mean, those are, you know, the newest one for me at least is Girl I Gif with her, you know, about Hillary Rodham Clinton clinching the Democratic nomination, which really speaks to my personal feelings regarding the presidential election, which is, you know, someone asked me today, how do you feel about Hillary? And I said, you know, it doesn't matter how I feel about Hillary. I know how I feel about Trump. And she's the only one keeping us from a Trump presidency. So even if she's not your fave, you know, the grass is definitely greener on the blue side than it is on the red side. So that one I think is a bit tongue-in-cheek. I like it because it sort of speaks to the apathy that some of us may have. Yet, you know, we are going to fall, you know, in formation, as Beyonce would say, and do the right thing in November.
I completely agree with you. I'll save the rest of my comments. The next question I want to ask you guys is, some people argue that the term Black Twitter is divisive. And there are some people who...
I'm not arguing that. When you say some people...
There's some who argue that the term Black Twitter is divisive and are against this whole notion of there even being a Black Twitter. What do you guys have to say about those who criticize the term and the Black Twitter community?
Well, I mean,
Well, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, these are the same people who complain about there being a BET Awards, right? When there's country music television and every other channel available to them. For me, you know, it's not as if we open up a different browser to find Black Twitter, right? You don't get a card in the mail. Okay, you've signed up, now your rate of April, you know, you'll receive your Black Twitter card in 4 to 6 weeks and you've got a special password to enter. It's right there. And if you were truly interested in the experiences of Black folks, you could become a member of Black Twitter. As I mentioned, you know, there are non-Black people who are members. These are the people that I have experienced who are concerned about Black Twitter are the same ones very often who complain about not being able to use the N-word. You know, and it comes from a place of privilege. You know, they are upset that there's something going on that they cannot be a part of and they cannot be in charge of. And to them, I say, you know, too bad, so sad.
yeah, I was going to add to that. I mean, as someone who went to an HBCU, historically, obviously, these are institutions. You know, even having a Black student union at PWIs, it's about creating these institutions because historically we were excluded from other places, or even if we were accepted, many times we were demonized or, you know, obviously put into negative connotation. And so Black Twitter is a place, whether it's divisive or not, it's a place where we can kind of come and collectively heal, you know, collectively get around certain messaging, certain issues, and I don't think it really matters whether people think it's divisive. I think it's a tool for, you know, equality and for, you know, for equity.
I remember one time when someone came into my DMs and asked me, hey, Xavier, how can I be a part of Black Twitter? And I told him, sir, I don't know how to do that either. You are asking the wrong person. But, like, what does that even mean? Like, how do you get into it, man? You don't punch a card or something, man. You just get on there and you listen to issues and you, like, reply and feedback on that. There is no, like, you know, entry level to this thing, and the idea that it's divisive, that doesn't even make any sense. Like, if you want to be a part of the collective conversation, you can choose to be a part of it. Either you're gonna like it or you're gonna hate it. And the few people that hate it and don't want to hear what we have to say in the first place are the ones who want to call it divisive. It's a completely nonsensical way or term to even call it divisive in the first place, because all it's doing is giving us a space as underprivileged folks to be able to speak up on issues that we need to talk about. And best believe you are more than welcome to come into this space and speak too. Now, you say something stupid, we gonna deal with you. But if you actually believe in the stuff and you want to learn and hear, you come, you listen, you hear what we got to say, and you know, you're a part of it. But the idea that it somehow like divides us, I promise you, when it comes to the infrastructure of America, many things have been divided far before anything called Black Twitter.
That.
Cosign.
Excellent answers. Brian, I'm going to ask you, Color of Change is, like you said, a online civil rights platform. Can you tell us a little bit more about the mission of Color of Change and kind of what their social media strategy is?
Yeah. So Color of Change has been around for about 10 years now. You know, it was started in the aftermath of Katrina by Van Jones and James Rucker at the time, when they just felt like we didn't have a political voice. So really, the mission behind Color of Change is to create that voice, create a foundation where we can collectively bring people together around flashpoint issues, whether it be Ferguson, whether it be Sandra Bland, whether it be, you know, Free Jasmine, and be able to bring coalitions together and unify in messaging, help to amplify grassroots organizations that are doing work on the ground, working, you know, actually actively around these policy issues. And so our mission is really to help amplify these folks to the next level. And so we've been able to do that by building a large, million plus subscribership where we can tap into people anytime and, get them excited and get them riled up about certain issues. As far as our social media strategy, we look at social media as one piece or one tool within our tool belt. We are a Netroots organization with traditional activist structure. So we look at social media goes hand in hand with talking with insiders, with lobbying, with sending out social media, with email lists, with panels, with thought leadership workshops, working with influencers in a variety of spaces around social justice issues. So, it's really one piece of a larger umbrella of social activism.
And as the entertainment director for Color of Change, you work with a lot of celebrities, people in the entertainment industry. In your opinion, are there any particular influencers or celebrities that you think are heavily utilizing Twitter right now to bring a voice to social justice issues?
Yeah, I think there's a great deal, a great number of folks. I think, anyone from like Jesse Williams to Zendaya, Yara Shahidi from Blackish to, Nate Parker, Ava DuVernay, all these folks have their own personal areas of focus, within the content they're creating and with the projects that they have, but they also get behind a great number of issues that are important to them and really help to use their presence and, leverage their social media following out around social issues. Like Mark Ruffalo is another person. We worked with him pretty closely on Justice for Flint, as well as a number of other issues around water conservation and water security. So,
excellent. So according to recent statistics, 28% of African Americans who use the internet have a Twitter account and are active on Twitter, compared to only 20% of white internet users. And that number doubles when we're talking about the younger generation. 40% of African Americans between the ages of 18 and 29 who have used the internet are active on Twitter, compared to only 28% of that same group of white users. Do you guys think that number will continue to grow in terms of the percentage of African Americans who are utilizing Twitter? Do you think it'll eventually decrease as they move to other social media platforms, or do you think it'll stay the same?
For me, I think unless Twitter just does something to completely change it up, I hope not. I mean, I remember they were talking about that thing where they wanted to make it to where you could add 50 people in the tweet. I was like, oh, that's a bad idea. I don't know if they stopped doing that or not, but I think because of the fact that we have such a huge network on there, such huge discussion on it, that I think it's only going to be increasing more and more over time, unless just something happens to completely break the system to where we move away from it. I mean, I don't know how black folks moved away from Bebo or Black Planet and stuff like that from back in the day. So I think it'll keep on going. It'll keep on getting bigger, and I hope so, because I think something that's so helpful about Twitter is that I go back, think about high school, even undergrad, getting or whatever, and a lot of the issues, a lot of the terminology, many of the things that I've learned now and soaked in from it, nobody was challenging me on that. Nobody was teaching me about that. My mom and dad love me, but a lot of this very, very complex ideals and issues that we talk about freely on there, for a lot of us, unless you go to an HBCU or you get into certain programs and stuff where there's a good big collective of us, you're not really you're not forced to see that. You're not forced to deal with it. And I literally can say in comparison to 4 years ago, from being on there, from taking everything in, from being in this sphere, I've learned so much about us and what I need to understand as a black person and a person of color. And that wouldn't have happened if there wasn't this collective for us to all join in on the conversation.
I agree with X. I think it's just going to continue to grow. I think one of the reasons we see the numbers as high as they are is because we're looking for that community. We're looking for that space. You know, you turn on the news, you don't see people that look like you don't see your stories, or you see your stories being told by other people. And I think that's one of the reasons that you see these Black youth flocking to social media, and you know why Black Twitter exists is because we're looking for that community. And unless we see a drastic change in the way that our stories are being portrayed in news and media, and even just on the streets, you know, the way people's perception of the Black experience and how Black people are, unless you see a drastic shift in that, I think the numbers will just continue to grow because people are seeking that out.
And let me just add how hilarious, I just want to say something that's hilarious. So, y'all saw Hillary did the whole delete your account on Donald Trump's tweet.
She got bold.
She got real bold. Now, of course, we came up with that first. We've been using that forever. And what was hilarious to me was, we came up with that, we've been using it forever. Then Hillary uses it. And then folks are like, what does that mean? And then literally, I think it was the Washington Post or the New York Times that literally did a post where they explained what delete your account meant. And I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. But the reason why I bring that up is the fact that for a lot of us, many folks that are on there, we know it's from us, we understand that, and we don't gotta listen to that. We don't gotta deal with something where it's misleading or it's misunderstood or whatever, and we can also have a collective laugh when we see somebody inappropriately use it or don't know what they're talking about in the first place. But without a sphere like Twitter, we wouldn't have had something that we creatively made that was able to pass around between us, and now it's a part of our collective understanding that informs our experience. Now, this is a tiny thing, and there's a whole nother discussion to be made of when we come up with something and then it gets appropriated by folks who don't know what they're talking about.
That was my next question.
Oh, let me be quiet. Let me stop. Okay, go ahead.
Brian, what do you think? Let me ask a more general question for you, and even April, where do you see Black Twitter in 10 years?
It's a good question. I was at a panel earlier this week, Salon for Gina Davis Institute on Gender and Media, and it was all about kind of Gen Z and their social media usage, and they don't use Twitter, they don't use Facebook. So I think that is potentially the challenge that Twitter is going to face, or that Black Twitter will face additionally, as far as a platform that will sustain over a long period of time. Because Snapchat, because more direct messaging types of platforms are becoming more important for that generation. That may obviously eclipse the level of usage on Twitter in 5 to 10 years. That's where I would see my own problem. But I do still think that Twitter really is an authentic space for Black folks to come together and connect on issues and just have an open space for them.
April, how about you? Where do you see Black Twitter in 10 years?
I think that it's going to be an even more vibrant space somehow. We have the running joke on Black Twitter that, how can this possibly be free? Because we get so much entertainment from it all the time. And I've had an opportunity to sit with the Blackbirds, who are the Black folks who work at Twitter, and have conversations about, what's next and what's important to the community. And, I think they really get it. I shout out to Josen and Jade and the rest of the crew. So I'm really looking forward to what the future brings. I was, a late adopter because I didn't join Twitter until 2010, I believe, and I just didn't get it. And now I literally cannot imagine my life without it. So I think that it's only going to get better as more people understand the power that Twitter as a whole holds, and also the power that Black Twitter has for our community specifically. For me, the motto of Black Twitter is, don't come for us unless we send for you, because you really don't want to get on the bad side of Black Twitter, and there are a couple of people, probably a handful of people that you just cannot drag or attempt to drag. For example, the Obama daughters.
you just don't. Like, if you value your life and your job and, and everything else, you're not going to want to, mess with them. Serena Williams is probably another, and they're all just examples of Black excellence. And I think we rightfully protect our own so vehemently. And so I'm excited for the future of Black Twitter to see what's next.
Awesome. And the last question I'm going to pose to the panelists, and then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience, is about appropriation. A lot of people argue that, a lot of the hashtags, a lot of the topics that Black Twitter comes up with, a lot of other outlets appropriate these hashtags, appropriate these topics, and don't ever really give any credit to the creators. And what are your thoughts on that?
From a standpoint of using hashtags for kind of social justice, equality, and activism, it's helpful. Obviously, when some people appropriate hashtags or appropriate messaging, obviously, if they are trying to do it in a way that would contradict what we're doing, then that becomes a problem. But when we use a hashtag and we develop a hashtag, we want it to be shared, obviously, far and wide, because that's really the impact that it has. Now, from more of a popular culture standpoint, you may be more protective in a situation like that.
I think for me, what's interesting about it, and I think like April can speak to this, or someone like Trudy or Feminista, where you look up and like you've gained this large following and you're talking about these issues and things like that, and you look up something like, hey, your tweet was just on BuzzFeed or just on the New York Times or things like that. I've had that happen a couple of times, and I'm just like, why didn't nobody tell me? Why didn't y'all like speak out to us? Or the worst perpetrators are the folks where they'll have like it'll be a post and then there's literally nothing but tweets. It's just all tweets essentially, and it's like, okay, yeah, you put all the tweets in, that's cool, but more than likely that person, those people, you probably could have just paid them to do it instead and write about this topic rather than just like doing that. Like, what's the point of you being a journalist or being on there if you're not able to speak to yourself? Or as a website or a company, if you want to know more about these certain things, why don't you just like choose us? Why don't you reach out to us? Ask us to write about it. Ask us to make our points about it instead of trying to filter it. So by the time that you finally speak of it, it's completely wrong or it doesn't make any sense. It's the reason why I brought the whole delete your account thing and how it was in the New York Times, one of them that made the definition of it in their thing. Now, of course, I have to go back and check. It may have been a Black person that wrote it, but the way it was, I was like, I don't know if it was or not. But the point being, that's more for me a bigger problem than maybe not the general hashtags, but more so how there's these individuals, Black individuals, who are making this great, powerful, thought-provoking content. And we still have a lot of these websites and companies who don't really appreciate it or feel entitled to our gifts and our work and would rather just take it from us or demand free labor from us for it. And that's something that I think, collectively we really, really, really have to push back on in general.
April,
I
do you
would
want to?
say, just to piggyback on what Xavier said, I mean, it happens all the time. And part of the problem is, and I understand Brian's point, there are times when you just want your hashtag to be used as much as possible because you're trying to get the message out and the issue behind the message. But, when we're talking about actual tweets, I mean, it happens to me weekly, if not a couple of times a week. And the interesting thing is, I can go on a Twitter thread rant about a particular subject and really, get into it, discuss it, and have a conversation on my platform, and then see that used. But if I attempt to pitch the exact same issue that I was going to, that I talked about on Twitter, nobody wants to pay me to actually write that article, or they'll interview me, which is great, but, they don't have to pay me for the interview either. They're paying the writer to interpret what I said as opposed to just having me write it, and so that's hard because, as you said, it's free labor, and, you know, I don't know all of my followers because I have a lot of them, but I do know that a lot of journalists and news organizations follow me. And so, you know, I can talk about something and then, you know, 90 minutes later, that issue is in the middle of a particular organization's article or something like that. And so my tweet has been extracted, you know, but there, and the other issue I'll say is my concern with seeing Black Twitter creating this hashtag, or Twitter did, because it should be personal, you know, and I am part of Black Twitter, but you know, I'm still a person, and so those articles that say, you know, well, Twitter created this, you know, Oscar so white, and it's like crazy, and it's like, well, you know, you don't have to interview me, that's on you, but at least acknowledge the fact that there was a real person who had the, you know, the foresight and the thought to create the hashtag, credit me, and then go on about your business. And that happens all too often as well. And it's unfortunate and it's a little disheartening at times because it feels to me like lazy journalism, you know, because for me, what I was taught, and I'm not a journalism major, I was a marketing major, but what I was taught is you find the source, right? And you talk to that source. And journalists find it, but they don't necessarily credit it or are interested in having a conversation, and I think that's unfortunate.
Excellent. Well, those are my questions for you guys tonight. I want to take a little time and open it up to questions from the audience. Do any of you guys have any questions for any of our panelists tonight? No? Okay. We'll start right there.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Hi. So my question to you guys is, we know that African Americans are disproportionately on Twitter, on social platforms, but we're not participating in terms of the economic benefits of that. And so my business partner and I, we have a social platform called Zen, it's video sharing, where we actually split the ad revenue with anyone who can build an audience. Xavier, I'm looking at you in particular. So my question is to you, how do you think we could best work with people like yourselves, people who are active on Twitter, to get the word out about how this can be empowering for the African American community?
So I think, so first off, kudos to y'all. That's dope. Let's talk.
Yes, sir.
I think the most important thing to do is, like, you know, if you see those folks, because, you know, one of the beautiful things about Blackness is that it just fosters creativity. It just pours out of us. And if you just go on Twitter, you're going to find so many people like me, bigger than me, smaller than me, who are just making this amazing content. And, you know, of course, all of us are thinking, like, you know, we would love to be able to just do this for our lives. Like, that will make a lot of us happy. That will make someone like me happy. And what I would say is the best way to reach out to those folks, to get them to try something different, to get them to work with you is, you know, don't demand free labor, and find a way to not only pay them, but make it worth their while to want to contribute in that lane. A good example of this is, you know, quite literally, I can't speak on it, but, you know, I got to do something really, really dope with Blavity, which is awesome. Can't talk on it right now. It'll come out at some point. But, you know, they reached out to me and they said, like, you know, what's good? We love what you're doing. We want you to work with us and we're going to pay you. And I was like, yes. Like, that's it right there. Like, you know, when our labor is no longer free, that's when we're going to be willing to, like, you know, reach out to other things. So, you know, I'm absolutely happy and blessed that I've been able to build a platform on Twitter. But I know that Twitter isn't the only thing. Things can always change. You may look up 10 years from now, like we're talking about, and Twitter's just gone. So what matters more to me is not only building an audience, but being able to do that to where it's something that can then become a living, or if not that, or hopefully that, plus it's a way for those creatives to get their ideas, their work, their projects, to get those type of things made. So, you know, that would be my number one thing to say. If you're going to reach those folks who are making great content through there, find a way to pay them and to make sure that they can keep on making these things. If they can do that, then, you know, of course they're going to work with you. Of course they're going to want to do more stuff with you in general.
That's the whole idea. Perfect.
Can I just make one quick suggestion that don't flip anybody your mixtape or, you know, whatever your equivalent of the mixtape is, that's a big, big no-no. So, you know, cultivate a relationship with whomever you want to work with before you say, hey, I have this dope project, I need you to invest or watch my movie or read my book or whatever, you know, whatever your talent is, because, you know, if you're reaching out to an influencer, there's a really good chance that they get requests all the time. So it's best if you set yourself apart and, you know, show that you're interested in who they are and not just what they can do for you.
You know, and let me just add to that. That's so true, because on a regular basis, I think I get maybe 5 or 6 emails a day of folks saying I got this great project, I got an amazing script I want you to read. And it's I'm already doing a whole bunch of stuff on my own, so whatever you're doing needs to be extra exceptional, or just, you know, truly, this is something I can get behind for me to do it, because at the end of the day, you can give me money, you can give me different things, but the one thing I can never get back as creative is my time. Time is probably the most important thing to me, because that's time I could have been using to create or make something for myself. So I do a quick story for that. I had one person, they emailed me and was like, Xavier, I got this amazing script that I want you to co-write on. It's already finished, and it's about gun violence, and I want to make it about black people in Detroit. Now, of course, this was not one of us. And I went through and I read the bad boy, and it was all types of offensive. Oh my God, it was so bad. It was so bad. And it was one of the cases bro, you can never put this out there, man. You will never find somebody that's going to work with this. But of course, I couldn't say that. So, after I read through it, I was like, excuse me, good sir, I don't think I can be a part of this, but what I can do for you is, for a small price, I can do some script coverage on it and tell you all the reasons why you should not do this, or at least change it completely from trying to make a magical Detroit gun violence film. And of course the person's like, well, I just wanted to have you as someone that co-wrote it with me, so that's okay. Don't worry about it, man. Maybe we'll work together next time. And I'm just bruh, really? You do a front that you really, the only thing that you really wanted was my name, to make sure that nobody could come back and say that, oh, that was racist or that was messed up. First off, you're not about to do me like that. I'm not stupid. But, I mean, it was just, I'm not saying you guys don't do anything like that. That person was terrible. But the point being is that come to the person, understanding who they are, what they're about, do research about them, pay them, and allow them to make content that they're going to be happy with. Don't necessarily come to them with something that's already baked, ingrained, and ready to go, and you just want to put this stamp of their face on it, because, most of us ain't going to deal with it. That's all.
Next question? Right over.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Ashley and I do Twitter for PETA. So I'm also in the social change activist space. But I guess my question is, a lot of times Black Twitter likes to attack us. The one day we were actually trending on Twitter because I was tweeting, and it was Super Bowl Sunday, and I was tweeting about how I think it's 3.2 billion chickens are killed for the chicken wings on Super Bowl Sunday. And we had 19,000 mentions or something, just basically attacking us or showing pictures of chicken wings or this and that. So I'm just kind of wondering if you guys have any ideas, and I already got some, but any specific ideas for how we can, I guess, collaborate more in this activist social change space, as opposed to, I don't know, if I'm doing something wrong.
You want to So there's one thing, for certain Black folks, and just folks in general, they just want to eat meat and do all that kind of stuff. There's nothing you can do about it. So you just got to kind of leave them alone. And there's going to be those folks that are going to send you chicken wings no matter what. So there's nothing you can do about that. The one problem that usually happens and why a lot of black folks usually like are not even maybe even a case of like just with PETA, but like a lot of folks who are vegan or veganism in general is one of the worst things that and it keeps on happening all the time is they'll bring up slavery and then they'll equate it to the and capture enslavement of animals. Now, I'm not about to get into like the semantics or the parallel of that. I don't agree with it. And for me, you pull something like that, it's racist, and I'm gonna send you chicken wings all day. But the point being is I think there just needs to be a better discussion of it and to understand like the consciousness of black people and the certain things that you need to better traverse with us. So there's nothing you ever do to stop folks from like, antagonizing you with like sending things or doing meat and all that type of stuff. But there are issues that you can specifically talk about with having a dialogue on that or understanding why like so many black people especially don't appreciate that or don't want those type of things. Because if you hit us with something like that, or like a parallel of essentially equating a black person, a human being, and having their lives being equal to an animal, we're automatically going to shut down because of the history that we have in America dealing with it and just in the world in general. So, that's, I think, a big thing for me and why, even though there's some, like, bashing that's going to happen at some point, but that's, like, a really, really big part of contention of why there's always a problem, and it's something that, just needs to be worked when you're coming to people of color, but especially black people, about issues like that.
Yeah, and I would just add, at the end of the day, if you engage any community around any issue, you really have to primer that issue a lot of times, very similar to what April was talking about, not just handing someone a mixtape and kind of just expecting them to receive it with open arms. Even as a racial justice organization that focuses on black issues, when we bring up certain issues that are still very sensitive within the black community, we are antagonized in many situations. So we have to really primer certain topics and, build authentic relationships with that community. And so, it's not going to be the first time or the first tweet, but there really has to be like an organic, authentic way that you're developing your relationship with a certain community before, expecting that they're just going to receive certain content.
And I think one important thing to remember, and it might not be this for this particular case, but sometimes you mess up. Like sometimes you get called out, and that's okay. And I think that's something that people, if you get called out or if you're made to feel uncomfortable in a situation, people are like, well, how do I fix this? Like, what went wrong? And it's like, sometimes you get called out, and that's fine, and then you have to learn from that. So in these scenarios, it's like, okay, kind of like you're doing, asking the questions why, and then reflecting, and then going back and not making that same mistake.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Just the fact that you came here, you brought it up, you talked to us, like, now I want to speak to you and, like, see what we can talk about with it, and I won't completely ignore you if you come to me about that, so that's appreciated, and that's the best way to, like, at least start it from there.
Okay, next question. Right up here in the front.
I mean, you guys can hear me.
Nah, get the microphone, go get the microphone.
So formal. I wanted to ask a question, actually, I just have to check my notes, about, or in response to kind of the discussion of people kind of co-opting tweets and like throwing them in their articles and not giving appropriate credit. So where do you, like, because there's articles or pieces that are kind of like Twitter roundup pieces, and then there are these other types of articles that you guys are describing, like how do you guys feel about that? Where do you draw the line between seeing something as like more of on a positive side, which is how I see Twitter roundups, to this more of this negative space where people are co-opting.
Right, so just, I think me and April can probably talk about this one pretty big too, is like, there's, as always, for me, it's like, if you're gonna use my tweets, use my words, it would be great that you pay me, but most times, more often than not, that's not gonna happen. So the least thing you can do, especially in like a website or you're putting stuff on that, is embed the tweet. don't screenshot it and put it up there, because that doesn't lead back to us. Like, it makes extra steps to get back to the source of it in the first place. And honestly, that's just really offensive. Like, why couldn't you take enough time out to just embed it and do it that way rather than just screenshotting that? Because I've had enough times where I've had to go, of course, I've gone to like a few sites where I'm like, hey dog, that's not cool. And then more often than not, they'll change it up. And if they don't listen, man, I hit them with something else and get it taken down. But it's just a case of like, respect. Like, this isn't free labor. And if you're gonna use our stuff that we talk about, then, have the common decency to notify us and make sure that the individuals who are interested in hearing more about us are able to get back to us. So I think that's like the best way. Like, number one, if you're gonna use our stuff, let us write it. If you're not gonna do that, then, make sure to attribute us right. And, it's nothing else. It's as simple as that. Like, honestly, for me, and like what April said, it's lazy journalism if all you do is just like put together like 20 tweets and just throw it in your thing. You're not actually giving any perspective on it. And you could have come to us and asked us to talk about it instead and give you more insight on this stuff instead of reinterpreting it. But then, I think there are different places and different sites that do it bad and do it well. Like, New York Times, Washington Post, a few ones like that, like they're terrible at it. They usually don't do it right in comparison to like, possibly Blavity, where I think they do a great job of making sure on certain tweets and things like that, it at least gets back to us. So, and I think that's just the case. Again, like Blavity is a black-owned site that kind of understands the Black Twitter consciousness and understands what it means for labor and all that stuff, and would at least try their best to make sure that we're okay in comparison to a New York Times or Washington Post, who don't really care, and it's more about just getting off their thing to like talk about the next topic without like, thinking about the individual that they're taking it from.
And I also think there's a huge problem with some outlets that are just using Black Twitter as clickbait. And I think that's becoming a bigger problem nowadays, where a lot of outlets are predominantly white, a lot of these news outlets are predominantly white, don't have any Black writers on staff, and they utilize Black content that they find on Twitter as clickbait. And they end up making a lot of money off the ad dollars from these clickbait articles. So I think that's becoming more and more problematic, where they're not paying any of these people who are creating the content. They don't even have any Black people on staff, and they're really just kind of using us to continue making money. April, do you have any comments on that?
I apologize because I couldn't hear the question from the audience, but even when they do have Black folks on staff, they still get it wrong way too often. LA Times, right, hired a Black Twitter journalist, and his whole job is to hang out in Black Twitter all day and write about the things that he thinks we're interested in. The problem is we had to get him out the paint initially because he wasn't a member of Black Twitter. And we're like, bruh, you can't sit with us. Like, we don't know who you are. What are your bona fides? Where'd you come from? And so his first article was basura. I mean, it was horrible. And we let him know. And to his credit, he tweeted through it, as we say, and learned from that experience and knew that if he was going to write about Black Twitter, that he needed to be not just in it, but of it, and he needed to talk to the people that are having the conversations that he wants to write about, and so that he can understand more about what's going on, attribute them when necessary, and have a better piece at the end of the day. I mean, part of it is, I've got a platform, Xavier has a platform, Color of Change has a platform. So if you're using, Blavity has a platform as well. So if you're using our stuff, why not just add us? In your tweet, when talking about the article, we're gonna retweet it because we're in it, and that just increases the views, and potential ad revenue that you're gonna get from the article as well. But just to put it out there, and fortunately, my followers now are like, hey, did you see, Oscar So White was used here, or your name was used there, and because I wouldn't see it otherwise, and it's often in those publications that want to appropriate from Black Twitter, but that we don't necessarily patronize. So you have the potential there to be increasing your market and your demographic if you were just more respectful to the folks that are in Black Twitter and recognize them as they should be.
Very true. And we have one more question right here.
I guess I should stand. You touched on a little bit of like kind of riling up Black Twitter and not respecting Black Twitter, but I also wanted to hear your thoughts about what I see a lot. I work for Black owned nerds, and sometimes what I observe with Black Twitter is that we're trolled for that clickbait you guys mentioned. And I be trying to get the followers like not to get into it sometimes because it's so obvious that some of these publications, some of these individuals, which will go unnamed because that's the point, they purposely say things just to get, you know, those go off the wall, and you're like, you're talking in a vacuum, you're not acknowledging history. And yeah, so I kind of want to see how you thought about this. Has this come up? Maybe ideas, you know, for some of us who have platforms where I sometimes don't want to get into it. I sometimes don't want to retweet something because of that, because I have a large following.
You know, that's real. I be 100% like I can't stand Piers Morgan.
Nah, see, why
It
you
is what it
mention
is.
them
I
though?
know, but the folks here, you gotta know what we're talking about. The point being with it is like, for example, someone like him, like all he does is find out stuff
Trolls.
and just writes ridiculous articles all the time that's specifically meant to rile us up. So we go read them and fight with him because it ends up like making money for him. And it's and you know, ironically, I'm doing it right now. Jesus Christ! But the just to talk about this, like honestly, I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure how to deal with it because I've had multiple times where I've gone on threads and like block him, like block him. Don't talk to him, block him. Don't deal with him, block him. Don't fight with him, block him. The only thing that he cares about is money. You got to hit some of these folks at their money. So if you keep on, if you deal with the trolling like that, like you're only helping him out. It's only gonna like make some people like him do it more. And you know, honestly, I can say I'm not sure about the solution because at the end of the day, like the thing about Black Twitter is not a monolith. So it doesn't matter how much you scream into the wind. There's just gonna be those folks that want to fight, that want to like say what they gotta say, and you just gotta deal with it. So I mean, maybe April or maybe somebody else has an answer on how we can like, you know, help that. But the only thing I can really say is, you know, you just tell as many people to try and block them or stay away from them and stuff like that. But that's something that's literally something I've been thinking about for so long because there's so many times where I'll see something that's like overly offensive and I just like, I can't take this. I want to say something that I'm like, man, but if I say something, it's gonna add to the conversation and make it worse. The only like thing I even try to do now is when I know it's bad or I know I don't want to deal with it, I'll just screenshot the image of the tweet and then talk about it to where that way it doesn't, there's at least an extra step that folks got to go through to try and find it. That's usually like my way of trying to contribute to it. I know there at some point there was like the do not link something site that where you could like put it in there and it wouldn't go back to the site, but I think that one like went down a while back, so I'm just not sure how to deal with it.